Hello, our friends, Evolutionary Energy Arts family.
Hello there, welcome back.
So, guys, we're just going to have like a little impromptu discussion because we were taking a walk today in the woods, and then, we're just having a discussion because I had said somebody had left a comment saying they'd love to hear more about the death and dying process. And, there's been so many instances lately where family members have had people pass on, tons, you can't count them all. And even family members that are almost going through that process now too, and taking the mystery out of it, I think can lead to a little bit of reassurance, and some comfort and understanding this is something that most of us have done many, many, many times.
Death is a process that is just as important as life. And there are so many things that in this dark Kali Yuga, they do not teach us when it comes to the death process, like how we are able to process another's emotions after death. There's a lot of things that we just simply don't know. So there's such a huge mystery. I think people are so afraid of it, but then again, our cells are programmed to want to live. So it's natural to feel that resistance to dying because again, that's part of living.
Yeah, there's a cycle. Yeah, and it's all part of the soul's journey, and the soul's journey typically includes many births and many deaths. Again, how many pants, how many shirts have you had during your lifetime? I can't count them. Yeah, and even cars. I don't know, maybe 15 cars, 20 cars. I don't know. Again, it's part of just simply how we get around as far as us as a spiritual being. Because we are, spiritual beings, again, having a temporary human experience. Can be a bit scary, absolutely. Thinking about, hey, this is the last days on the planet. Hey, what am I going to find when I open that door? And really, we're all individuals, and we each have gone through our own life experiences. And those life experiences, as well as the things that we expect to see, they do paint the picture of what we find as we do transition.
Mm-hmm. If I can give people a visual, this is something that I've always seen since I was a little child about death. And when we do die, it might sound a little silly to some, but so many people come to meet you. They come to greet you. They come to congratulate you. They come to talk to you. I mean, this is one of the things that I have always seen, and there's some other things that I have seen too. Like when Zeke passed away, I was able to see that process go and how he came out of the spine. And Mike and I, we have these talks about his mom when she passed away, and I get these glimpses of her. And just even recently I saw her. It was strange. I could see like pure white pants sitting down somewhere, and the best my mind, I guess, could understand it is that she was traveling. So we just kind of pop into these conversations and look beyond and see what's going on after death. And there's definitely some processes that go on there because energies are very chaotic a lot of times when we're in the 3D body, and it's best and easiest if everything is in order. That allows us to go more places when we are just a soul or when we are an orb.
And we've covered that before about how in essence, spirit orbs are just that. That's people out of the body. And sometimes we'll go by this one cemetery, and there is one spirit who introduced himself to us as Butch. And the way he introduced himself to us was by finding himself drawn into Cindy's body, because Cindy is a unusual channel, and she could completely trance channel, and she does trance channel sometimes spontaneously and other times like in a partial trance. And so one night in the middle of the night, all of a sudden, I hear more of a masculine voice saying, "Hey, what's going on here? Where am I? I'm a woman." You know? And so I said, "Who is this?" And he said, "Butch." He just answered right away. "It's Butch." "Hey, Butch." And then we find out that Butch tends to a couple cemeteries locally, and one cemetery is practically in our backyard. And so, he's there often, and he likes to greet the newly departed that are stuck to their bodies, and they don't realize they don't have to stay around or in their body anymore. They can go and venture anywhere they want to. So, when he was leaving, he was like, "Come on, guys, let's go." And he's gathering up the other spirit orbs, because again, when we're initially out of the body, that's what we're going to be as a spirit orb per se. And, depending on the circumstance, people might see you. If your consciousness is still having a strong recollection of what you looked like and has a strong association with that, you might have that traditional ghostly see-through thing where you can make out a person and even make out their features, which Cindy and I have both done many times. I remember when we were living in Nevada in a tiny little, western town, I said to Cindy, because I noticed there was something really strange about this one woman I perceived walking down the alley right by where we were loading up water, and I was filling water tanks. And I said, "Did you see that lady?" And she said, "Oh, the one in the red dress, looks like she was dressed in the 1890s. And I said, "Okay, it wasn't just me that saw that." So people can manifest like that. They can manifest like that. And we are all, as we go deeper into this time period, as long as we stay free and clear of all the nanu and all the signals, we'll be able to develop these abilities, and we'll be seeing beings all the time on what we would call the other side, quote unquote, the astral realm, 4D, etc., etc. It'll just be a normal thing. And for Cindy and I, and many of you guys too, I mean, we have regulars that have these occurrences all the time. We'll talk to them every 2 weeks and do energy work on them, and we'll find that they've had different encounters or saw this, saw that, and Cindy can see what it was and will verify for them. So touching on my mother, when she was a day before she passed on, and I was in Nevada and she was in Connecticut, I felt her tug on my chin because she didn't like my facial hair. And I've had facial hair almost my entire life for the most part. And she'd always tell me, "Be clean shaven," because that's the way my dad was, totally clean shaven. And I could tell it was her tugging on my chin. And what were we doing? We were doing Qigong. We're just standing there gathering the life force. And many other times too, I would feel other spirits by us when we were doing this, because when we're gathering the life force, it's benefiting them too, and they could actually kind of help themselves energetically in their own process. My mom was, I think, saying goodbye to me then. She was out of the body, even though her body was still technically alive. And then after she had passed, we asked where she was as far as the 4D spectrum, and we got a number right away of 4.45. So basically in the middle of what we would call 4D, or the astral plane, so to speak. So typically, people will do a life review if they're not traumatized. See, if you're severely traumatized, the danger is you get into these energetic loops that you can't get out of. And that's where Butch has helped people many, many times, trying to get them out of the loop, because again, he doesn't have a body, but he's still able to telepathically talk to people and to help them realize what's happened to me. It can be so traumatic when there's accidents like this one here. You could see what looks to be a spirit rising. We see this depicted in ancient art, and people were able to see in other ages this much easier than we are now. But you can see multiple pictures of this motorcycle accident in Kentucky that has a pretty, it feels like maybe it's slightly augmented, but it still feels kind of typical. This is kind of how things really are. Often people are above their bodies, looking down, saying, "Wait a minute, what's going on? That's me."
Mm-hmm. It can be really confusing, at first. And what I have been told and what I tell other people is, upon passing, you definitely want to understand where you're at. And as far as Butch is concerned, he does help people at the graveyard and gather them up if they are stuck to their body, and he helps them leave, and he helps them, go to where they need to go so they can create, so they can grow, so they can move on. But a lot of people have a lot of traumas, and they end up in the fourth dimension. It could end up in the lower fourth, where it's very chaotic. And if you could imagine, we always talk about thoughts are things. They are literal things. And if you're really in that lower fourth, you could get caught up on these a whole lot of different thoughts, and a very noisy, very chaotic place. So upon death, it is, I think, the best thing to be is just calm, just calm, quiet your soul. And there is something to processing your emotions, processing as many traumas as you can when you're in the physical. If there's anything that you need to confess, anything that you need to say, this is called witnessing and telling someone else so that you can process in life. Because there are people who have passed on, and they're wanting to process their energy through another living person, because that brings them less chaos. But at the same time, that can be problematic for the person who is living, because they have to process all of those emotions, and that's not always fair. And sometimes you have to push these energies away because it's not healthy for you. We all have to have our boundaries. We need to stand strong. We need to be anchored. And if you are one that's really anchored and you're really strong, and that's something that you feel you can do, great. But I always, kind of mention to people that it can really cause more problems within your own life. Even though it's a nice thing to do, we all have to have boundaries. And if that's not something that you're able to do, then you're really not doing a service to that entity. Better to make yourself strong, and then at some point down the line, when you're wanting to do that, go ahead and do it. But the lower fourth is very chaotic, so you want to try to be calm. You want to try to have things processed as best as you can, because that's not a place you want to get stuck in.
Absolutely not. And so my mom passed away 3 years ago, January. And so in that time period, what we got was that she was, basically at first doing her usual thing. She was 90 years old. So what did she like to do? She liked to do crossword puzzles, jumbles, scrambles, things like that. Word games for the most part. She'd read her papers. When we would look in on her, she had created with her mind, her consciousness, basically the kind of the recreation of her old place, and was just usually doing those things. Yes, she did visit with my dad, who had passed on 20 years earlier, with my brother, who had passed on, back in 1973. 1971, actually, 1971. So a long time ago. And so she did catch up and visit with all of them, and then start to consider what to do, process the emotions. Like, she had a traumatic time with a sick child from the age of 5 to when he passed at 16. And that was very traumatic for her. So there was a lot to process. And so also, having a sick child for so long also made it so that they were always in financial hardship, because of the bills and everything. So there was a lot to process. And, at first it seemed that she was leaning towards having another incarnation. and coming back in and maybe doing something as wild and crazy for her as to be reborn somewhere in Asia this time, as she was somebody that hardly ever really left her area. She was always on the go, but never went very far, is how I would put it. And so that would be so wild to think of my mother having a life in a different country like that. But that's part of the soul's journey, and each one is unique. They're all just chapters. Every life is just a chapter in the book of the soul. But now, when Cindy was picking up on it, there seemed to be big changes, and she was picking on the fact that my mother was kind of traveling, moving. And now she was dressed all in like a bright white. And so where she is when we were zeroing in closer is she's gone back up to like 5D now. So she's in a higher density. And she's thinking more in terms of perhaps being a guide, or what we would call an angel. Because again, what is an angel? Well, an angel is just somebody that's not going to come down and have this hands-on experience, but instead going to be there to help. So, again, in some ways it's interchangeable with spirit guide. And again, an angel is somebody that is in alignment with the original purpose of creation, because they understand the purpose. As we've talked about the controllers and how everything is distorted and used to take advantage of others' experiences, what should be their growth experiences. And then there are souls that come into the most challenging aspect of all, just because it does offer such possibility for huge growth.
Mm-hmm. So looking a little bit deeper into his mom, it's curious because feels like she's wanting to come and be an earth angel, but there's things that you need to learn to do that. And funny enough, Mike's father, who has passed, he's one that I can see teaching these things, a lot of different laws about karma and what you can and can't do, because you do not want to involve yourself in somebody's life that could change their life path, change the way they make decisions. You want to be a support. There's certain ways where you can access information or relay information, and it has to be done very carefully. So if there is an entity telling you that things are going to happen tomorrow at noon, you really don't want that entity in your world. Absolutely not. Because once they tell you what's going to happen, that entity now is living your life. And that's karmically not good. Not good. When we come back as an angel, there's ways that you can speak through other people. You can speak through music. You can speak through emotions. There's a lot of times when I am communicating with a loved one, I feel these auric hugs, and it's such beautiful energy. So this seems to be what she's learning now, and she's going to learn how to come back here and communicate in many different ways. So I'm kind of excited to watch this process kind of go through, because I get to see this stuff now and I get to understand it better. I'm not saying I understand it completely, but I do get to see a lot of it, and a lot of information comes to me, and I like to share it with you guys to the best of my ability.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, one weird aside that we should, maybe we could just, share, and I've touched on it, is that since my mom has passed on, I found, and I always thought it was just because I was missing her. I just found I started to get more and more of affinity with her favorite form of music, which was jazz. She loved jazz, loved it. And she was somebody that, just couldn't sit still. She danced up a storm, even at 70, when she had her 70th. Well, I take it back. That was her 80th birthday. She was still kicking over her head. She had a better memory than me. Even just 5 years ago, 5 years before she passed, she had a better memory than I do. It was amazing how she could recollect all these little things. And I would have already been moving on, because my mind's always thinking about the next thing that we have to work on, and stuff. But, her recollection was so strong. But the music, somehow it's attached itself to me. And I was never really so much into jazz, but now I find that I love it. I absolutely love it. And, it's kind of like become my music of choice when I'm kind of in that zone and you just kind of want to space out a little bit. So it's something that I've picked up from her, because they will, when we talk about our parents and our lineage, there's things that we do inherit from them. And when they kind of leave the world, they will give us gifts that we may or may not notice.
I know. I think one time we mentioned the word gifted, and somebody got very upset in comments, saying that everybody has them. But what we mean when we say gifted is now these energies that Mike's mother has, she's going to gift them to him. So that's what we mean by gifted. We can be gifted these things from our ancestors and our loved ones, and then we'll actually feel ourselves kind of taking on some of those energies. So there's going to be certain things about Mike's mom that he is now going to activate, and that's another part of the death process, is that a lot of those things in the 3D go back to the one who is left in the 3D, and they get to experience them.
Absolutely. To give you another way that we could see how the movies are mimicking reality, like, in The Matrix, where I forget who it was it Trinity or somebody's flying a helicopter, and they're like, I need a download of how do you fly a helicopter program, right? We could do things like that. So one of my grandfathers, both of them I never met, they both died 6 years, both of them, before I was born. One was a farmer, and the other one was a mechanical engineer. So when I had some questions on a construction project and all, I asked Cindy, can you see what Grandpa would say? And so she shared with me, because she could connect to him right away. And then from that point on, I would always just kind of think of him, visualize him, and wait for his guidance to come through, and then go ahead from there. So we can do that. We can tap into the abilities of our ancestors and our DNA lineage.
This is fun, because I like to use Sita as a really good example, and she's a Doberman, so she is created, she's a watchdog of sorts, even though she's just our little love. But one thing that she does is she cases our whole yard. It's like she has this way that she does it, and I strongly feel it's because her father, grandfather, and the others were trained watchdogs, very, very much trained to do that. So what she's doing is naturally tapping into that DNA and just reading it, and it becomes second nature to her. She doesn't need to be trained anymore. And that's why, some of us might have the abilities like I have. I just tap into it. It's nothing that I've been trained to do. This is information that's been passed to me, from my father through grandfather through great-grandfather, and here I am, and I read all of that information through a string of shamans that have an understanding of life and afterlife, and I tell you guys, to the best of my ability, with the vocabulary words that I use, and I try to choose the best I can to help bring you understanding, and I do hope it helps. The one thing I want to do is bring people peace, bring them understanding. I want to take the mystery out of it. This is something that we should be able to fully enjoy and not be afraid of, and then understand where these emotions come from. And some of you text me and tell me situations and wanting to know, well, what does this mean? What does that mean? And I'm able to tell you, and that brings you peace. And even if it's not peace, it's understanding. And isn't that what we really need in this age, is some understanding of the why and how things operate?
Absolutely. So we hope that you guys found this interesting and informative. Please do share other ideas for other things that you want us to cover, and we will do that. If you want to set up an appointment, it's evolutionaryenergyarts@gmail.com. Again, evolutionaryenergyarts@gmail.com. Usually 2-3 weeks to get a time slot. And there's more information at evolutionaryenergyarts.com. As always, guys, much love. God bless and namaste.
Namaste.